Welcome to Wesley Impact. I'm Keith Garner. If you had a disability, would you let that inhibit your dreams or desires? If you were born with or developed a disability, would you let that stop you living life to the full? Thank you for joining us today. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with an inspirational man who, despite being blind for his entire life, has not let his circumstances stop him from being one of Australia's leading law lecturers. Ron Mccullum was born premature back in the 1940s, and as they did at that time with premature babies, he was put in a humidicrib and had oxygen pumped in to help with his development. But a side effect, which subsequently has been discovered, was that too much oxygen can impact upon one's sight, and as a result, unfortunately, Ron was left blind after the treatment. Never been one to lie down throughout his whole life, Professor Ron McCullum pursued his dreams, studying law and then moving on to become a law professor and a lecturer at Sydney University, and now an academic in the area of law. I'm looking forward to speaking to Ron. Also in today's programme, we'll be joined by Erica Crocker singing a wonderful song, My Worth Is Not in What I Own. And I'll be speaking about a person who was a personal friend of Jesus. We're looking at characters from the New Testament and one the Lord reached out to. Lazarus was close to Jesus, so much so that Jesus would call upon him and even stay in his home at Bethany with him and his sisters Mary and Martha. There's a fascinating account in Mark of Mary and Martha waiting on Jesus in their home. And it illustrates the difference of the nature of the two women. But Lazarus is best remembered as one who was taken sick, died and was buried, and after 4 days was brought back to life. Now, living with a disability can either be inhibiting, or we can focus on the ability and then realise what one can achieve, obviously within the confines of the particular context. At Wesley Mission, we seek to work with people who have a disability just as commonly and as freely as we do with people who might be considered able-bodied in the fullest sense. As with any person, somebody living with a disability has dreams and desires and wants to live life to the full. And these dreams and desires should not be dampened down simply because of a person's ability or disability. Virginia is one person who came to Wesley Mission with a disability. Instead of focusing on what she couldn't achieve, she focused on what she could. And after working with her for a little while, Virginia then found a childhood sweetheart in Darren. Darren and Virginia reacquainted and now married. This is a wonderful story of overcoming one's obstacles and focusing on one's ability, passions, dreams, and desires.
My name is Virginia Samuela, but most people call me V. I'm 42 years of age. In 2007, at the age of 34, I came down with a massive migraine, just came out of nowhere like a clap of thunder. I was at work at the time. They rushed me to St Vincent's Hospital in the city and ended up being in hospital for a couple of days. They did a lumbar puncture and a CAT scan, and they said there was nothing wrong. So they sent me home with a script for Panadol Fort, and that was it. Went home, was in incredible pain for a few days. Ended up calling my dad, said, come pick me up, I need to go back to the hospital. He came, picked me up, we went back to the hospital, they admitted me straight away. And within a week I had my first stroke, and in 2 days later I had my second stroke. Everything changed overnight, everything, like my whole life. Like I went from being a very independent person to being a highly dependent person. I've now been basically told that I'll be in the wheelchair for the rest of my life. Without Wesley Mission and services such as Wesley Mission, I'd probably be in a nursing home. Like that was what the government had in store for me. That was where I was going to end up. And we fought, my family and myself and my case management fought tooth and nail to keep me out of a nursing home. So we need places like, you know, Wesley Mission and Disability Services. We need them to help people not end up in those situations. I've been one of the lucky ones, but there's not many lucky people out there. There are people that do end up in nursing homes. I hear it all the time and it breaks my heart. my case manager had put me onto a waiting list for the YIPRAC. And YIPRAC is a young people in residential aged care, and that was one of the services that came under Wesley Mission. It's basically like a nursing home, but for younger people, like up to the age of 55. It's a government's alternative to young people living in a nursing home, basically. The best thing about Wesley Disability Services are the people who have done a lot for me in terms of not just being there for me to support me, but even to sometimes moral support, or when you're sad, they're there for you as well. Having Wesley Mission there to help support me in my life, and that's been crucial. And I wouldn't have been, like I said, I wouldn't be here where I am today without them having been there to support me all this time. Wesley Disability Services helped me by providing that foundation, that place to live, and that stability to be able to grow and learn and expand on my own skills. The future now is all about new life, new beginnings. With there's such a big change, just recently with moving into our new home, having that new life with my mother-in-law and my husband, being able to finally sleep in the same bed again, finally being able to share our lives with one another. It's been the first time that we've been able to do that since we were together almost 20 years ago. It's challenging, but it's fun to be able to work those out and basically move things at our own pace and make our own rules at our own pace and live our own lives without having, other constraints from living in supported accommodation, which is good for it had its purpose, but now our purpose now is to live our life as we choose to live it.
If you would like to see more of the work of Wesley Mission, visit wesleymission.org.au. You can watch loads more videos, catch up on past episodes of Wesley Impact TV, find out about our diverse range of services, and get involved to help make a positive difference in your community. You can also connect with us on social media and stay up to date on the latest news and information from Wesley Mission. wesleymission.org.au.
And if you'd like to find out more of the work we do at Wesley Mission, please do visit our website, wesleymission.org.au. There you'll be able to find out about not only the services just mentioned, but a whole spectrum of our work. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'll be speaking to Professor Ron McCullum. Ron was born 10 weeks premature and placed in a humidicrib. Unfortunately, too much oxygen was pumped into the crib and he was left without sight. But he didn't let that stop him achieving in life's ambitions. Ron went on to study law, went on to become a lecturer at university, and has lived life really to the full. To tell you more about his story and to share some of his experiences, I'm delighted to welcome Professor Ron McCullum. Ron, it's great to have you on the show.
It's lovely to be here, Keith.
When I look at your achievements, and it certainly does look like a real catalogue, it's impossible to think that somebody who's lived with blindness has achieved all that. Do you refer to your blindness as a disability?
I used to try and succeed despite my blindness and put it in a cupboard, but in 2008 I changed my attitudes when I became an Australian candidate and was elected to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of People with Disabilities. There I was confronted by my sisters and brothers with many disabilities throughout the world. Disability is synonymous with poverty, particularly in developing countries. And I became part of the disability family, and I feel a bit more positive now, I think.
So you've been involved in a particular aspect of law. I've been interested in that. You might call it industrial law, but labour law is how many people might remember it, isn't it?
Yes, I came from a poor background, and I saw labour law as a way of social change, of ensuring fairness between employers and employees, and as one of the bricks in helping to build a just society. And so I've been involved in labour law for 45 years.
Who are you most, I suppose, thankful for in life when you look back? Because we all have the people who've helped us most on this journey. Who do you feel the most thankful for?
I'm very thankful for my mum, who ended up being a single mum after the death of my father, who really helped bring me up properly. My surrogate mum, Lois Story, who took over, and now my wife, Mary Crock, whom I call my Ruth as part of the Book of Ruth, who's joined my life for 30 years.
You talk about that, Ron. It's so important to you, because the Christian faith is important to you, isn't it? And
Yes,
it has been.
I think Jesus is a great teacher, and I find the Ten Commandments a good way to live. They've been around for a few thousand years.
And Christian meditation is something that you practice day by day, isn't it?
Yes, I've been involved in Christian meditation for 21 years, the worldwide community for Christian meditation, and I try and meditate every morning with my mantra. It's a type of silent prayer. It's communing with God, with the universe, and it's very much part of me.
And that influences the way that you see the whole world.
It's drawn me to the writings of Lawrence Freeman, a modern Christian, in meditation, and it's taught me that there's a place for everybody on our planet, all humans, all sentient beings.
And that book in the Old Testament of Ruth is very special to you, isn't it?
Very special, because my wife and I came together 30 years ago. She's extraordinary. She's another law professor. But in many ways, Ruth is special. It's the story of outcasts coming together, of happiness, of giving and fulfillment. I cry when I read the book of Ruth, every time.
Tell us about some of the obstacles that have been there, because I can't believe that there weren't obstacles on this journey.
Well, when I first became a student, I had to have everything read to me by mouth, and there's a lot of law, and I had to have it read into tape recorders so I could remember, and I had to use my memory very strongly, and I spent the first 20 years as an academic doing it that way until computers came along in the mid to late 1980s, and now I can read via synthetic speech on a computer screen, but for the first 15 years or so, I did nothing but work, because it was just so hard to remember and to keep up.
And did you ever feel like giving up in the middle of all that?
No, because I loved teaching and it was my destiny. And I didn't know about computers. I didn't know computers would change my life in 1974. And if there's no alternative, you just keep going. It was I knew from an early age that I was going to be a labour law teacher, and that was my calling or my life. And there seemed no reason why not to continue.
And today the opportunities are there for people if they can take up what's available for them to be able to live life to the full, more than they ever were.
Absolutely, particularly in developed countries like Australia, with all our technologies, with disability units at universities, with the National Disability Insurance Scheme. It's much, much different to when I was born. When I was a young fellow, the main occupation for blind people, if you didn't get much of an education, was making baskets or brooms. Now, blind people are doing all sorts of things in all stratas of society. Disability is a difficult thing, but I think now's never been a better time than to be disabled in our country.
Well, Ron, it's lovely to talk to you. Thank you for sharing with us something of your story. It's certainly an inspiration to many people. And may God continue to bless you, because you've lots ahead of you too. God bless you.
Thank you, Keith. Bless you too.
My worth is not in what I own, not in the strength of flesh and bone, but in the costly wounds of love at the cross. My worth is not in skill or name, in win or lose, in pride or shame, but in the blood of Christ that flowed from the cross. I rejoice in my Redeemer, greatest treasure, wellspring of my soul. to wonders here that I confess my worth and my unworthiness, my values fixed and my ransom paid at the cross.
It's been 200 years since the first Methodists met in Australia. To celebrate 2 centuries of faith and pioneering care, CEO and presenter Reverend Dr. Keith Garner takes us back to where it all began.
But we don't begin here at the heart of London. We begin in a town in the north of England.
In this fascinating narrative, Reverend Garner chronicles the history of the life and times of the founder of Methodism, John Wesley. This fresh and thought-provoking documentary takes us on a journey throughout the United Kingdom, beginning in John Wesley's hometown of Epworth.
John Wesley was born here on the 17th of June, 1703.
This 1-hour DVD travels onto his education years and beginnings of social justice in Oxford, to his final years in London. For more information on John Wesley, the man and his mission, call 02 9263 5555 or email us at impacttv@wesleymission.org.au.
Now, today's character from the New Testament is Lazarus. Now, unlike many of the others we've looked at, he's not an apostle, but a friend of Jesus Christ. How do we know that? Well, Jesus stayed at his home. And when he received the news of his illness, we know that he wept when he heard of his death. Now, that account is found for us in John chapter 11. It's a very long passage that concentrates but on this one incident, and one incident more than any other incident actually in John's Gospel. It's connected to one of those great statements, the great I am statements. I am the resurrection and the life. And the wider section is an important section. So I'm going to read to you just 2 verses from John 11, 43 and 44. When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Now, the miracle is narrated modestly, and it's Jesus' words to which Lazarus responds. The position in John's Gospel is important to note. It's the last event prior to the Passion journey. It precedes the plot to kill Jesus, and it deals with one of the most challenging of all issues, death itself. But it's also important because it serves, I think, as a transition into the final part of the Gospel. When Jesus declares himself to be the resurrection and life, it gives us a lens through which we can understand all things. And this account of the bringing to life of Lazarus mustn't be confused with the resurrection of Jesus, because clearly Lazarus died. It's not a case of Lazarus is coming out of this grave and he'll never die again, but he brings him to life. He brings him to life, and in doing so points to something more profound, the deeper sense of God's presence in life. And I like it for many reasons. I like the fact that Jesus is moved at the death of a friend. I mean, this thought of Jesus wept is such a powerful thought, really. It tells us so much about the humanity of Jesus. It tells us something of the way in which he reached out to people in their personal lives, to Lazarus, to Mary, to Martha, and to their home. It also gives us, I think, an insight into his response. Now, I think at first people were a bit disconnected by the fact that he didn't come immediately. He didn't immediately turn up at the door. But the truth is, he had confidence. He had confidence in his friend. He had confidence in his own ability through the Father to raise him to life. And I think for all of us, it gives us some insight into the identity of Jesus with people in need, whoever and wherever that need is. When I study the New Testament and I look at the way Jesus' healing ministry is exercised and his compassionate ministry, there's an indiscriminate sense in which God reaches out to people of all kinds, to people on the parameters, to people rejected by others, to people whose physical ability is in some way not able to be lived to the full, to people whose emotional ability is maybe not to the full. In every sense, Jesus reaches out and touches and heals. But on this point, it's his words when he says, come out, that become the important part. And when Jesus says his resurrection and life, that still has a lot to say to us. Resurrection and life is not only about life, whereby life goes on forever, it's about quality, it's about depth. When Jesus says his resurrection and life, he brings the best out of people. He brings life in all its fullness. In the chapter before, in chapter 10, we know that Jesus said, I have come that people might have life and have it to the fullest. Now, in conversation with Ron just a few minutes ago, we heard of somebody as a Christian who's understood his life through that lens of the Christian faith, that has somehow opened up for him a whole insight and being able to see in a different way than merely physical sight, the deepest and most profound things of life that perhaps are important. And as he meditates upon Christ, and as you this morning might know what it is to turn to God in Christ, I pray that you might find something of the new life, the strength and the healing grace of Christ. May you know today that Jesus Christ is resurrection and life. And like Lazarus, you might come out of whatever tomb it is that you live in, which may not be, of course, be a death tomb, but it may be the need for liberation, the need for being released, the need to be free, the need to be able to understand that you can live life also to the full. So God calls us through this character of the New Testament, not an apostle, not a disciple, but certainly a follower with a very special close relationship with Jesus Christ. And we pray that somehow we might not only learn from him, but we might discover the strength that there is in following one who calls us to new life in Jesus.
If you would like to contact Keith and find out more about today's program, write to us at Wesley Mission, Post Office Box A5555, Sydney South 1235, or you can send an email to impacttv@wesleymission.org.au. On our website, you can catch up on past episodes of Wesley Impact, find out more about our work, read online magazines and articles, and connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. You can also connect to Keith's blog and stay up to date on all of the latest news and information from Wesley Mission. wesleymission.org.au.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. And as you've just heard, there are so many ways in which we can keep connected with Wesley Mission. I hope you enjoyed our discussion with Professor Ron McCullum, especially in terms of understanding Lazarus and understanding him too, somebody who was restored to usefulness. He didn't see his life as being simply something that was locked in and couldn't be achieved to the full. And there came to be that turning point for him. To find out more about what we do at Wesley Mission in helping others and looking at past episodes, do go on to that website at wesleymission.org.au. If you'd like to contact us, I'd be very pleased to hear you. And also our address is on the screen now, impacttv@wesleymission.org.au. It was wonderful to hear Ron's outlook on life and his desire to keep achieving as if he didn't have a disability because he had all kinds of other abilities. To Ron, living without sight is normal. And I guess we all have our own obstacles and things in life that we have to deal with. At Wesley Mission, as we work with people through their disability services each week, we seek to empower people to achieve their life's desire, to focus on their abilities instead of their disability. There's nothing more destructive in life than death, and death not just in the physical sense, but not seeing a way forward. Ron and many like him have discovered that God always has something more. Now, Ron, if you were to say one thing to a person who was either born with a disability or perhaps developed one, what would it be?
It would be to live life to the fullest that we all can. And now there has never been a better time for people with disabilities, with the NDIA, with bodies like Wesley Mission, with society that's more open to we persons with disabilities. Grab life with both hands and live it.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next week. Thank you and God bless you. And may the week have for you many opportunities for you to enjoy life to the very full.
Wesley Mission helps more than 500 people each year through our Wesley Disability Services. To find out more, visit wesleymission.org.au.